All right, here we go. Writing equations for circles in standard form. This is the standard form of an equation for a circle. We get this f of x equals part. Let's take a look at what we have. What we're going to need to write this equation is the x value for the center point. We write the opposite of it here. In other words, if the center point is at 2, 3, the x value is positive 2. So when I write this standard equation, I'm going to write minus 2 right here. The y value is positive 3, so right here I'm going to write minus 3. If the center point had been at negative 2, negative 3, I would write the opposite. So this would be plus 2 because the x value is negative 2. Plus 2. The y value is negative 3, so plus 3. I know it's hard to wrap our minds around sometimes writing opposites, but that's the way that it works. Over here, we're going to write a numerical value like 9 or 16 or 25. Whatever you calculate for the radius, if the radius is 3 units long, you'll write 3 squared or 9 right here. Right here you put the value of the radius squared. So let's take a look at some of the ways that they're going to ask you, or that they give you information and ask you to write the equation for the circle. They might give you something that looks like this. And this is perfect for writing the equation of a circle. In this, we're going to need to complete the square. And we will have to do that 2 times. Once for the x's, and then again for the y's. So the first step that we want to do is move all the y's and x's over here to the left-hand side. It could be left-hand side or right-hand side. They just all need to move to the same side. And the squared terms need to be positive. On the left, the x squared is positive, the y squared is positive. If either one of them were negative, then they would need to be moved to the other side. So I look at this, I've got an x squared, I've got an x to the first power. I'm going to group those two together. So x squared minus 4x. Then I have a y squared. So taking care of those. And I wrote it down wrong. Okay, I think this was supposed to be a y. 10x's come over here. Let me just start that again. Change this to y. Alright, so I'm going to group the x squared. And over on the other side of the equation is minus 10x. That needs to be moved over here. And you do that by adding 10x. So now that gets put with my x squared value. Now my y's. Plus y squared minus 4y, and all of that is going to equal negative 20. I'm going to group with parentheses. Here's what I need to end up with. X plus or minus some number, the quantity squared on the outside. Y plus or minus some number, quantity squared on the outside. I get that by completing the square. Remember, to complete the square, you take this number right here and you cut it in half. So x squared plus 10x plus this number cut in half, so 10 divided by 2, and it gets squared. Now we need to do the same thing for the y's. Y squared minus 4y plus, there will always be a plus right here when you're completing the square. 4 divided by 2 squared. So there's some things on the left-hand side that weren't there before. I added them. One thing we know in math is if you do something to one side, you have to do it to the other side for the equation to remain in balance. So over here on the right-hand side, I also have to add 10 divided by 2 squared and negative 4 divided by 2 squared. Alright, so let's clean this up a little bit. In completing the square, what we are actually going to write is x, and then half this number. Half of 10 is 5. It's positive, so plus 5 squared. This is the binomial factors for this. If we were to multiply this back out, this is what we would get. So I factored that, and here's what we got. Now we do the same thing for the y's. There's a minus sign here. So y minus, now half of this number, half of 4 is 2, squared, equals. Now over here. Negative 20 plus, well, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. And then plus, negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and negative 2 squared is positive 4. All right. Now let's clean this up even more. There's nothing else to be done over here on this side. Only on this side. So we write this again, x plus 5 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals. Negative 20 plus 25 is positive 5. Positive 5 plus 4 is 9. And that's the equation for the circle made by this equation up here. Complete the square, regroup, complete the square, and then simplify. Alright, well what if they tell us what the center point is and the radius? How do we write the equation? It's quite simple actually. You will have x and then quantity squared, y quantity squared equals. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the opposite of the x value. It's negative 5, so this becomes plus 5. And then the opposite of the y, it's positive 2, so minus 2. And then square the value that you have here. It's 6 squared, which is 36, and there we go. That will give us a circle that's centered at negative 5, 2 with a radius of 6. These are actually the easiest ones. Opposite, opposite, squared. Well, what happens when you have a graph and you need to write the equation? To write the equation, you need the center point, and then you need the length of the radius. So let's find the center point of this circle. I can see it's symmetrical across the y-axis, so if I just count from bottom to top to find the length of this diameter, not only will I find the center point, I also will know what the measure of the radius is. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, it's 13. So half of 13 is 6 and a half. So the radius is 6.5 units long. The center point, I can either start here at the bottom or start from the top, count to the center halfway. And it's going to be 6.5 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. There's my center point. My x value for that point is 0. My y value for that point is positive 6.5. So my equation is going to be x minus 0 squared plus y minus 6.5 squared equals, I take that number and I square it, 6.5 squared. Now let's clean it up. Since there's a 0 right here, it can go away, and I have x squared plus y minus 6.5 squared equals, and I grab my calculator and I do 6.5 squared, 42.25, and that's it. Find the center point, write it down. Calculate how far it is from the edge of the circle to the center point. Write it down as your radius. You could have counted this way as well. Take the opposite of the x value in your center point. Take the opposite of your y value in the center point. Square the length of the radius. And there you go. The equation of the circle that made this graph. Ew. Ew. How will ends of a diameter? Remember, a diameter is like this. It runs from one edge of the circle to the other through the center point. So that gives us a clue of how we're going to tackle this exercise like this. Because halfway across that diameter is the measure of the radius. The radius is half the length of the diameter. And if I find the very middle of the diameter, I've found my center point. So we're going to need two things. Distance formula, yes, and midpoint formula. So here we go. Let's get started. All right, let's do the distance formula first. If I find how far it is from this point to this point, I can cut it in half, and that will tell me what the measure of the radius is. So the distance is going to equal the square root of, okay, it's the second x minus the first x squared, plus the second y minus the first y squared. And that you can do in your calculator. Alright, so square root 2 minus 2 squared plus 0 minus 6 squared, enter, 6. So the distance all the way across, the distance of the diameter is 6. If the diameter equals 6, then the radius equals 3. Now I need the center point. I need to know how far to go to find the center of this circle. Well, if the radius is 3, and let's see, both my x values are the same, then that means that my x value is going to be a 2, and the distance between 6 and 0 is 6, so 3. Let's see, the center point is going to be at 2, 3. So let's just go ahead and calculate it using the midpoint formula. So the midpoint is going to equal x plus x, so x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And so that's going to equal 2 plus 2 divided by 2, comma, 6 plus 0 divided by 2. And when I simplify that, 2 plus 2 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. 6 plus 0 is 6, divided by 2 is 3. My midpoint of this diameter, very middle of this diameter, is also the center point of this circle. It's 2, 3. So I have the center, and I have the radius. So the equation is going to be x, the opposite of positive 2 is minus 2. The opposite of positive 3 is minus 3. The radius is 3, so I square it, 9. That would be the answer. I got that using the distance formula, the midpoint formula. Alright. When they give you the center of the circle and a point on a circle, they've given you 2/3 of the information you need to write the equation. You know it's going to be x minus 5 quantity squared, y plus 2 quantity squared. But what will you put for the radius? Well, if you have a center point and a point on the circle, and if you connect those 2 points, that will be a radius. So what is the distance from the center point to this point on the circle? Aha! Distance formula. Here we go. Alright, so x2 is 3 minus x1, which is 5 squared. y2, which is negative 3, minus y1, so minus negative 2 means plus 2 squared. I'll clean that up a little bit. We can actually just type it in the calculator, but here you go. 3 take away 5 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. So the distance from the center point to a point on the circle, that is what the definition of the radius is the square root of 4 plus 1, or the square root of 5. Now we're ready to write the equation. Here's our center point, so we're going to have quantity x minus 5 squared plus quantity y plus 2 squared equals, here's our radius, we square it, so square root of 5 squared is 5. You don't believe me? Let's type it in the calculator and find out. square root 5 squared. 5. There we go. Now the last one. You have the center point and you have a circumference. All right? Not a game changer. You have 2/3 of the information you need. It's going to be x minus 1 quantity squared, y plus 4 quantity squared. All you need is to measure the radius. Well, you have circumference, and circumference is 2 pi r. That's the formula for circumference when you have a radius. We use this formula, or this form of the formula to find the circumference because it uses radius. And that's the measure that we're trying to find. So 2 pi times square root of 3 is actually the radius, not the radius, the circumference, and it equals this formula. Solve for r. 2 pi is being multiplied to r. So divide by 2 pi, and do the same thing on the other side. That cancels out. R equals, that cancels out, square root 3. Now we're ready to write the equation. From the center point, the opposite of 1 is -1, so minus 1 squared plus y. The opposite of -4 is +4, so plus 4 squared. And now the value that goes here is r squared. R is square root 3, so square it, and you get 3, and there you go. The equation of a circle when you have the center point and you know the circumference of the circle. You can do this. Do them all. You've got plenty of time. If you have questions, call me, message me, come see me at the school. Just call first, make sure that I'm going to be here. Watch this video over and over again. You can do it. Bye.